Welcome back to the Sales Cadence Podcast. This is the podcast for everyone in sales, because everyone is in sales. We're all selling something. My name is Matt Sykes. I'm your host. I'm the author of the book Sales Glue and Converted. And if, like me, you're as passionate about helping people make truly epic buying decisions so that more people buy what you sell, great news. You're in the right place. Folks, welcome to the podcast. Ever found yourself in a role that wasn't right for you? Over the last couple of months, I've had conversations with 3 salespeople. 2 of them have reached out on LinkedIn. 1 of them I know personally. And I've had some really useful conversations with those individuals. But all 3 of them are struggling. They're unhappy. They're kind of lost. And we're trying to find some way of improving the situation that they found themselves in. First person, really great salesperson. Know this person, but working in a relatively growing organization. And if I'm honest with you, the root cause of that individual's problem is not limited just to them. It's also down to the fact that the organization continues to send these stretch targets for their salespeople to try and hit. Spreadsheet economics doesn't work, folks. There has to be some realism behind why someone would want to put a stretch target in front of a salesperson. And this stretch target really is causing the individual some concern, as you can imagine. And of course, if there's an unachievable target in front of somebody, unless you've got that real growth mindset, then you're always going to struggle to see the upside and the ability to go and achieve that. If your conversion rate isn't continuously improving or the number of sales qualified leads isn't growing, then it doesn't take an idiot to work out that without those 2 things in place, a stretch target is going to become somewhat of a challenge. And so that individual was really having a conversation with me about, well, what do I do next? The second person had some issues in their personal life and unfortunately was bringing that into the workplace. And so, I'm not qualified to give any kind of psych advice. But again, there is some relevance between how we behave at home and how we bring that attitude and mindset into the workplace. And it's pretty clear from the conversation I was having with that second individual that was having a big, I'm going to say, negative impact on how they did the day job. And then the third person really was, after some kind of conversation, understanding more about the background, it was pretty clear that this person, despite the fact they were a wonderful human being, incredibly good, I'm sure, at what they do, unfortunately what they do is not right for the role that they're in. So absolutely right person, but wrong job. And, a lot of that responsibility obviously sits with them before they accept a job, make sure it's the right fit. And a big responsibility goes obviously to the employer who's found themselves with a really great individual, but someone who's not adding value to the sales role. And so sort of really, when you think about it, I'm pretty sure there aren't just 3 people out there that are struggling right now, depending on where you're listening to this. So here I am based in the UK, and the narrative in the marketplace at the moment is somewhat challenging because, new governments come in, there's a different strategy in terms of improving the UK economy, and at the moment is based on getting more tax in, create more revenue for the Treasury, and in theory that will somehow find its way out to increasing growth and optimism. But at the moment it's having the opposite effect. Again, I'm not a politician, so I can't really comment, but I do know what I know from speaking to people in the marketplace, that at the moment it's a challenging environment, certainly here in the UK. And so what that's going to do, of course, is put even more pressure on the frontline team that's designed in an organization to go and find sales and bring revenue into the business. So people are going to be starting to really look at their sales team now and go, have we got the right people on the bus? And if we have we given them enough support to be able to go and keep us afloat or improve our situation in what at the moment is a challenging marketplace? And so off the backdrop of that, it's clear to see why these 3 individuals are finding it difficult, because their organization is putting them under pressure. If I think back to my own past, if I go back 15 years ago, I was in a strategic role, sales director, and I was deliriously unhappy. I spent more time behind the laptop than I did in front of a customer. I was spending more conversations with the board, pandering to their needs, than I was in terms of being able to listen to my team and help and support them. And I did unfortunately have that, I'm going to call her an unrewarding boss. Very good individual at what that person did, just not particularly good at servicing my needs as an individual. And so ultimately I left that business. And so I can totally relate to anybody in the marketplace right now who's finding themselves in a role which is effectively making them unhappy. And again, I'm not a psych, but I do know enough about that world as well, because I did run a franchise that specialized in performance psychology for 6 years. So I have a good understanding of the top level way in which we think. And obviously how we think is going to have quite an important impact on how we show up in life. So look, this episode really is speaking directly to anybody out there who's currently in a sales role and they're finding it difficult. I'm going to share with you some advice that I've learned, and who knows, maybe some of that advice might be useful. I'm also going to be pretty hard hitting because, here's a key point right from the get-go. Typically, there's only two reasons why people struggle in the sales role. It's either a prospecting problem or it's a sales conversion problem. If it's a prospecting problem, you're just not having enough conversations, which means you're not doing enough lead generation work. If you are getting enough conversations going with the right people, if you're being served up effectively sales qualified leads and you're not turning those into cash, then you've got a sales conversion problem. And both of those are your fault. But great news, both of those can be fixed. And probably another podcast, because I want to focus more on what are the things that you can do if you find yourself in an unfulfilling sales role. Or you're in a great role, but unfortunately at the moment, you're in a bit of a trough and you just don't know how to get yourself out of it. So there's a number of things that we can certainly explore and discuss. And the first thing, I'm going to call it an option. The first option that you do have is to do nothing, which sounds bonkers. And actually it is bonkers, because doing nothing is really the reason why you're in the situation that you find yourself in right now. And so doing nothing is probably not the best option for you. You don't need to be Einstein to work out the likely outcome of continually doing nothing. I mean, if you're serious about change, serious about improvement, if you've got this far, 7 minutes into this episode and you're interested, then it strikes me that you're the sort of person that would want to do something. So doing nothing's not an option. Sales is no place to be if you're following a strategy based on hope. So whilst doing nothing is certainly one of the three examples I gave you of those three people that reached out to me, there is one person there who is doing nothing at the moment, and there is only going to be one likely outcome. It's not going to be a great one for that individual. So let's eliminate doing nothing. It's an option, but probably not the best one. Number two is the opposite of that, actually. You can do something. And if I think back, I gave you the example of me not being happy in a corporate role. Actually, on two separate occasions in the last 15 years, I've left jobs because I was not fulfilled and not happy in those roles. You could argue whether that was the smartest thing to do. But for me personally, the big takeaway from actually taking ownership and responsibility of knowing that I was in a role that wasn't making me feel particularly content was I took action. So doing something is the second piece of advice I would give to somebody. And the great payback about doing something is you get this immense feeling of empowerment. And so what could you do? Practically, what could you do? I'm not suggesting for a minute you should go and quit your job. That's not the point. It is an option you have, but I'm going to leave that until probably the end of the podcast. What could you do right now if you were in that situation where you're struggling? Well, the big mistake I certainly made in the past a number of times is not sitting down with my boss and asking for help. Problem shared, is a problem halved, all that kind of stuff. Now, let's just go through the practicalities of sitting down or arranging a conversation with your boss and saying, look, boss, it's not working for me at the moment, and here are the reasons why. In theory, this should not be a surprise to them. They should already know what's going on, right? And actually, they should already know what to do to fix it. The reason why they're sitting slightly higher than you is because I would like to hope that they've already walked in your shoes, that they've experienced some of the challenges that you've experienced, that they've probably made the mistakes in trying to get out of it, learned the lesson and found a better way. And that's why they're the boss. Their job is to know that you're struggling, and their job is to know what to do to fix it. So, the first piece of advice I'd ask anybody to consider is go and book a slot, go and reach out, pick the phone up, ask your boss for an hour of their time and just vent your frustrations and share with them what your problem is. Because I don't believe it's going to be a surprise to them. Now, ask them to share what they think about you. What is it that they see that perhaps you can't see? Can they give you a couple of tips to try and improve? I think between the two of you, you really do need to agree what success looks like. I know it's a bit of a trite statement, but if you don't design the future, you've got no chance of aiming towards it. So agree what is success, and then ultimately reverse engineer and design a plan to get there. Have you got to go and make more appointments? Have you got to go and improve your conversion rate? Whatever it is, create the plan and then decide what you've got to do and when you've got to do. And then you can leave that meeting with what essentially is an agreement about what happens next. Not an assumption. A good friend of mine, Oliver Hill, taught me about the difference between assumptions and agreements. If you're leaving a meeting assuming things are going to happen, don't be surprised if they don't. If you leave a meeting with clear agreement of, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that, I'm going to do it by this date, we're going to meet again and you're going to hold me accountable, you've got a real chance then of actually going out and achieving something. What else can you do? You can do stuff on your own. So you don't necessarily need to go and air your issues and your dirty washing with your boss, although I do advise that is the most important thing to do. You can do stuff yourself. I mean, sit down and review your last 6 months worth of metrics. See if you can understand, what is the data telling you? Can you find some evidence in the numbers that allows you to go, well, potentially that's going down. What you're looking for are descending trends. Is your call rate dropped? Is your lead quantity reducing? What is the lead score? Are some of those leads that are coming in actually 1s and 2s rather than 4s and 5s? Where is that lead source? Am I seeing a decline in the number of leads that are coming in through the website? And if so, why is that? Can I do something about it? What you're looking for is evidence. Look at your conversion rate. What's the conversion rate of a lead to a meeting? Are you finding that quite a lot of the leads that are coming in actually aren't relevant to you and therefore kind of no point in having a meeting? If you're having a meeting, what's the conversion rate like from turning that conversation ultimately into a proposal? And then ultimately, what is the proposal conversion rate to a closed won or a closed lost? All of that information, that data, is going to provide you with the evidence to know, well, where is the root cause of the slump that I'm finding myself in? And here's the spoiler alert, folks. If you haven't got or can't find trend information, there's your problem. There is absolutely no excuse in 2025 not to have a CRM. I don't care if you're a sole trader or you work for a large organization. If you do not have a CRM, you are not a salesperson. Every CRM is free, certainly the freemium version. I personally have a HubSpot. Other CRMs are available, of course, and I only use the free version. But if you don't have some way of tracking data, then I'm afraid there is your problem. A salesperson that doesn't have control over their numbers really shouldn't be in sales at all. So again, ask yourself the question, is there some data I can look at? What are the trends telling me? And if I haven't got any data, slap on the wrist, I'm going to go and find some way of measuring it, because if I can't see any evidence, what chance have I got of knowing where to start to address the issue that I find myself in? And on the subject of conversion rate, go and review your sales process. Have a look at those stages where you take a lead to a sale. What's it like in your qualification, disqualification process? What's it like when you decide and send a proposal? What's it like when you then follow up and ask for the business? A typical problem I see with many of the clients that I work with the first time is they really do not have a very good, predictable, proven process for qualification to convert a lead into a sales conversation. They waste a lot of time hanging around with people that really they shouldn't be hanging around with. Too many salespeople, in my experience, are looking for a yes rather than a no. It's a bit like that kind of selective listening. They're listening for a yes. What they should be doing is leaning in and searching for a no. There were some stats a number of years ago, I think from Gong AI, 60% of buyer-induced leads result in no sale. Let's just think about that for a minute. More than 50% of the inbound leads that come into your business are going to go nowhere, right? That's a staggering stat, but it reminds me of the brilliant advice from Marcus Kauke, which is sell with a shield, not a sword. That is epic advice. You want to be going into your sales conversations defending yourself, because 60% of the conversations you're going to have are probably going to be a waste of time. Look, understand and review your sales process. If you're not sure, go and get someone else to review it. Get someone in the industry who you trust and respect to review and critique it for you. Or shadow someone of that ilk, someone who you do respect, you see as I'm going to call them a high achiever, someone who knows what they're doing in the world of sales. Go and shadow them. Go and ask them what they do. Ask them to walk you through their process and see if theirs, A, is a relevance for you, and B, does it align? Or are there some gaps in yours that you don't see in theirs? But either way, doing something about reviewing your sales process, I believe, will be a really good investment of your time. And then the last thing I think you can do is improve your product knowledge. Now, I used to mock product knowledge back in the day. I remember doing a video back pre-2018, 2019 about one of the mistakes that organizations make is they spend too much time learning about product knowledge. I've changed my opinion on that because I had a stark lesson once where I didn't have enough product knowledge, and that had a dynamic and negative impact on my conversion rate. Right? Nothing spooks a buyer more than being in front of a salesperson who doesn't know their shit. What buyers really want is somebody who knows more about the problem than they do and even more about how to solve it. So one of the things that might be missing, and one of the reasons why you might not be getting the sales results you're hoping you should, especially if you're new to a role or new to the industry, is maybe you just need to go and ask yourself the question, do I have enough product knowledge? Am I able to transmit enough information to the buyer that allows them to grow their confidence in me as an individual, to know that I know what I'm talking about? Because if I can do that, then in theory, their level of trust in me should go up and their suspicion about my inability to help them will go down. Now, and I call it MVPK, minimum viable product knowledge. You just need enough. Now, too little, as I've just suggested, you'll kill trust and confidence. But too much actually can also have a negative impact. If you focus too much on the product knowledge, you do run the risk of turning yourself into a walking website. No one wants to be in front of that salesperson who just bangs on all the time about the levers and the pulleys and the whistles and the bells. So there is a finite point where you just need enough to convey that confidence. If you're not convinced in your own ability to do that, then you're going to struggle to convince somebody across the table. So MVPK, what is the minimum viable product knowledge you need to have where you transfer that confidence across the table to the other person and you don't bore them senseless with the flux capacitor and the Flugelbinder and the Vorsprung-Durch technique.
You're listening to the Sales Cadence podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Now you can join me in regretting this in real time.
Another thing that came to mind when trying to help people get out of a funk is you can change the way you show up. Again, I'm going to refer back to, I'm not a psych, but you can absolutely think differently about the situation that you find yourself in. So in those 6 years I was running that training franchise, I think there are some real, I'm going to use that phrase, low-hanging fruit. I'm sorry. There's some low-hanging fruit if you just are willing to accept the fact that you can change the way you show up. You do have that gift. You have that ability to turn up with a slightly different attitude because no one thinks for you. You do think for yourself. And I'm going to put this one right out there. Even though right now, whilst it's tough, whilst you're going through a bit of a slump, whilst you're getting some aggro from upstairs where you're struggling to see how you're going to get yourself out of this situation, even though it's tough right now, I'm here to tell you there are millions who would swap places with you right now to have the job that you have. Right? So the low-hanging fruit is just be grateful for the fact that you're in a sales role that probably pays you reasonably quite well, and just say, okay, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to work this because I'd much rather be in this job, being paid this money, working for this organization, despite the challenge, than not. So the first thing I think you can do is you can start to change the way that you think about the situation that you find yourself in. I think going in partnership with that is that there is, whether we like it or not, as humans, we do have this default negativity bias. We have been brought up as a species to protect ourselves. The risk, of course, with that is if we aren't willing to A, understand it and accept it, and B, change it in some way, then we are going to create for ourselves an attitude where we're always turning up feeling slightly pissed off. Now, I'm generalizing there, but you get the idea I'm trying to share with you. In the past, it's helped us, it's kept us safe. It stops us from doing stupid things, but that can hinder us and impact our ability to see things slightly differently because we've always got these dark sunglasses on. And the challenge with that negativity bias is when we do find ourselves in a bit of a slump in the sales environment, we start to think very negatively, and we create this kind of closed loop negativity spiral. We go round and round thinking about the problem that we find ourselves in, knowing that there's a shit market out there. All the leads that come in are rubbish. Every conversation I have is with those 60% time wasters, and we just repeat and we go round and round and round and round. And if you're not careful, you can kind of train yourself to be habitually negative. And so what you've got to do is you've got to break that. Wrong podcast if you want the Tony Robbins thing, but how do you break it? Well, you break it because you feel that there's something not right. And the great thing about thinking in a negative way means you'll feel shit. You won't feel great. And that feeling of not feeling great is the trigger that basically prompts you to go, I don't feel great. Okay, shall I change that then? And so, again, wrong podcast, but go and Google or AI, affirmations, manifesting, all that specialist stuff. I'm sure if you wanted to, you could go and learn about that stuff, and some of that stuff may be useful and helpful. For me personally, if I'm just going to give you one practical tip when it comes to the sort of the psych thing, and you'll have heard this many, many times from many, many sources, you may even have had a go yourself. Write stuff down. My practical tip for changing the way you show up is to write down in a journal or somewhere on your phone, write stuff down. It doesn't have to be huge achievements. It can just be how you feel. Because if I go back to that point of a CRM, what journaling allows you to do over a period of time, if you do it consistently enough, is it will serve up information. And some of that information is going to be very helpful. I've had a journal since 2014. Have I used it consistently? Have I written in it consistently every year since then? No. Have I written in it? Yes. And so if you look at my journal, there is 11 years worth of sporadic input where I've written down at certain key moments in each year how I'm feeling. And it's fascinating when you look back at it. There's an entry in that journal where I sold a dream house because money was tight and I had £4.29 in my business bank account. And, you can imagine what I'm writing as I'm putting that entry in. And then if I look 6 months, not even 6 months later, 4 months later, there is the absolute opposite entry, which is sheer joy. And I think I closed a huge deal. And so what that gives me and continues to serve up is evidence, which is, it's a bit like that wonderful expression. I had a podcast with a guy called Ian Tucker. Go back about 15 episodes, you'll find Ian Tucker, How to Live in the Moment. That's a wonderful podcast. If you're interested in this kind of psych stuff, I would encourage you to go and listen to Ian. But he has this beautiful phrase, this too shall pass. And that journal evidence story I've just shared with you is a perfect example of that. 1 month, I got $4.29 in the bank account. 3 months later, 4 months later, huge deal drops in. So the great news is, yes, I'm going to go through some slumps, but I've also got evidence that says, yeah, but it ain't going to last long. This too shall pass. So have a think about writing stuff down. I guess another piece of advice when we think about changing the way you show up is change the way that you show up in a practical sense. Extract yourself from those people that you might be surrounding yourself with at the moment that are holding you back. We do hear that quote that you are the sum of the 5 people you hang around with most. Well, who are you hanging around with most in a business sense? Are you in a team full of mood hoovers, underperformers, average Joes? I'm not here to criticize. I'm just stating a fact. I've been in many sales teams where we've had a whole variety of different personality types and performance types. Are you hanging around with those that are holding you back? Is it time for you to shift desks? Is it time for you to unfollow a few folks on LinkedIn? If you're in an organization where the sum total of the team's attitude is to be just enough, don't be surprised if you take on that too. I'm working with a client early stages at the moment where there is some challenge in that team. There is a lot of disconnection. There is a lot of, I'm going to say, negative vibes in that sales team, which we will correct. But if you're sitting in an organization or you're surrounding yourself with people that aren't going to lift you up and help you see a way out, then it's going to be really hard for you to do that. And so changing the way you show up could be extracting yourself from some people that aren't serving you well. The classic practical tip is, do you need to implement something different? Create a LinkedIn strategy. Do you know what? If you're going to unfollow a few folks, is now the time to say, right, I'm going to change direction. I'm going to start posting strategically to try and find more business. I'm going to go and put some thought leadership stuff out there. I'm going to create that position in the marketplace where people view me as someone that helps them solve the problem that I fix. And if I do that over a period of time, then I might just get on a few more radars of a few more potential prospects and buyers. And as a consequence of delivering that thought leadership, I'm also going to go and connect with more of those people that lift me up, inspire me, those people that perhaps I see on LinkedIn that are saying all of the right things, doing all of the right things, and providing me with inspiring information that helps me. I'm going to go and find some more people like that. The next piece of advice I would share from my own experiences is go and ask for help. I know we've touched on this in a previous point where asking and sitting down and talking to your boss. So absolutely go and ask for help from your boss. But don't be limited to that. You're going to get one response, one particular style of response from that individual. Go and get some slightly different flavors. So go and speak to a colleague, someone that you respect. Go and ask them, look, you can see I'm struggling. If you're going to coach me, what's the one thing that you would suggest I should do differently? So go and seek to speak to a colleague. Extend that out to LinkedIn. Reach out to a few LinkedIn connections, ideally people that you know personally. But you don't have to limit it to that. But go and ask them for help. What would they do? Have they experienced something like this? And how did they get over it? If you want to, and again, I would heavily encourage this, if you are a professional salesperson, you invest in yourself. And so go and invest some money and go and find a mentor. Go and find someone who professionally for a living helps people like you solve the challenge or the problem that you've got. And finally, maybe, and this is a little bit left field and possibly one that you might not want to do, but go and talk to a customer. At the end of the day, the reason why you're in the mess that you're in is probably because that customer's not giving you enough business. There'll be a reason for that. And maybe it's incredibly easy to solve. It may well be that, yes, they're cutting back too. The market sucks. And so we're just pausing a little bit before we spend more money. Great. At least that gives you some kind of practical evidence to help you solve this burning issue you've got inside you, which is, am I as shit as I think I am? Well, maybe you're not. Maybe the customer is helping you with some tangible evidence that gives you a slightly different perspective. Equally, they may be saying, actually, yeah, we have an issue with you, and let me share what that is. That might be difficult to hear, but Christ, you'd want to hear it. In my experience, good people want to help good people. If you're reaching out to good people, they will fall over themselves to help you. You would be quite surprised, in my experience, if you reach out to folks and ask for help, what comes back. The next thing, and I think there's two more. And so off the back of that, go out and invest in some professional guidance. The sort of penultimate tip is go and help yourself. Go and get some training. Go and get some help and support from someone who's a specialist in the industry that you know can help fix the problem that you've got. But here's the key point. If you aren't willing to invest in yourself, then why on earth should A, your company, and B, why should the market repay you? Sales is changing, whether we like it or not. The principles are still the same, but the noisy bit around the outside, engagement, marketing, the fact that there's a whole load more information out there for your buyers and your prospects to go and research about you. Yeah, that bit's changing and will continue to change, but the fundamental principles don't. You've still got to have a conversation with somebody who looks like, sounds like, feels like the sort of person that would have a problem that you fix. You've got to have a predictable process to help them understand why they should fix and help them create a case for change. And then you've got to go and help them make that change. That will always be the same. And finally, the last piece of advice I'm here to share with you, if you try all that stuff and it doesn't work, you need to leave. You need to leave the company. You might need to leave the profession. I've left 2 roles in my career. The first one I've explained to you was spending far too much time away from my team and the customer. And the second time, I actually found myself in a corporate role where I was unemployable. I knew I was unemployable and I needed to move back to a place where I felt most fulfilled and inspired, and that was working for myself. So if you find yourself in a role that doesn't work and you've tried some of the things that we've spoken about in this podcast and it just hasn't worked, and you still find yourself going home at night pissed off, unhappy, if you're sitting there on a Sunday worrying about Monday, my humble advice to you is leave that job. People fall into sales, they don't choose that. I'm happy to accept that. I used to wrestle with that, but maybe there's some freaks like me out here that did choose a career in sales, but most people don't. Most people find themselves in a sales role. They don't necessarily seek it out and choose it. Well, why don't you use this opportunity to go and choose a different job? Go and choose a different career. Go and do something that you want to do. The flip side of that, of course, is it's a wonderful place to spend your working days. If you're willing to apply yourself, if you're willing to invest in yourself, if you're willing to seek advice from others who you respect, that you admire, if you're willing to, continuously learn, be humble, if you're willing to create a personality in an environment where that happens, I'm here to tell you that you are going to have a fantastic career, because sales is a brilliant place to be. If you find yourself in some challenge at the moment, remember Ian Tucker, this too shall pass. You've got to go and find the practical evidence to confirm that that is the case. But I think we've talked about a few things on this episode which hopefully will steer you towards those things. Go and seek some help. Go and do something. Doing nothing is not an option. Doing something is. And so, if you found this episode useful, then my encouragement to you is go and share it with somebody. If you know somebody who's working for you in your organization right now who's struggling, just ask them to listen to this episode. I'm hopeful that they will at least try and find something in there that might be of use to at least start them or kickstart their ability to get themselves out of the slump that they find themselves in. If that's you and you've listened to this podcast and some of this stuff has resonated, I'm here to help you. If you want to reach out, you'll find me on the website, salescadence.co.uk. Go and book some time with me. I'll happily talk to anybody who's got some challenge. If it's LinkedIn, DM me. I'm happy to try and point anybody in the right direction. But it's got to start with you. Thanks for listening.